Of the many aspects of capitalism we discuss on our podcast, some are particularly dear to us. One is how AI will affect capitalism. The second is the role that non for profit institutions play in capitalism. The third is how we can offer equal opportunities in a world that is very unequal. And finally, we're very interested in the future of universities. Is the business model broken? What is the future? What will substitute it?
It's rare to find a person who encompasses all four themes at once. One of these people is Sal Khan, the founder of the eponymous Khan Academy. If you lived on Mars for the last 20 years, let me tell you that Khan Academy is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere.
So I try to do this back of the envelope calculation and say the average US public school spend roughly $17,000 per student per year, and provide the students with 1,200 hours of education a year. So if you do the algebra, is $14 per hour. So if we had to price the contribution of Khan Academy at the same rate, we will have that its contribution to humankind is of the order of 14 billion at the cost of last year only of 72 million. So if you think about value creation, this is an enormous value creation.
That is a pretty incredible calculation. And Khan Academy is not limited to the United States. It has a platform in 4 languages, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and it is translated in more than 24 other languages.
In 2014, Khan has also created Khan Lab School, an independent school in Mountain View, California, associated with the Khan Academy. More recently, in partnership with OpenAI, Khan Academy has also developed Khanmigo, an AI-based tutor that can help you do system personalized learning. As he writes in his new book, Brave New Words, it is what Alexander the Great had with his teacher Aristotle. If Alexander was having trouble with a concept, hard to imagine, Aristotle will slow down. If Alexander had a knack for understanding something, like, for example, military tactics, I'm sure Aristotle would have sped up his instruction or gone deeper. By having this one-on-one attention, the student never feels stuck or bored. This isn't just something that happened in the deep past. Today, top athletes and musicians, for instance, continue to learn through one-on-one coaching. However, without the support of teaching assistant or technology, it's hard to imagine an individual teacher getting anywhere near this level of growth with a single coach and 30 students all at the same time.
Of course, as your resident semi-cynical journalist, I have some skepticism about all of this. If you plunk a child who is really struggling in front of the greatest teaching, computerized or AI teaching assistant in the world, is that really going to make a difference and address that child's issues? OpenAI was looking for ways to make it seem harmless and helpful, and voila, here's education in the wonderful brand name of Khan Academy. In his book, Khan argues that this will be a help to teachers, not a substitution. But really? And isn't there a risk that in an era of budget cuts, this will further exacerbate divides between rich and poor, as the rich get human teachers aided by AI and the poor kids get just AI?
Bethany, thanks for being our local skeptics. But before we judge, let's talk to Sal Khan. So you were a very successful hedge fund manager, and at some point in your life, you decided to give up your career and start Khan Academy. Why?
Oh yeah, well, I'm flattered you say very successful. I was a reasonably successful hedge fund analyst, but as a lot of folks know, this was about 21 years ago. It just came out of conversation that I had a cousin who was having trouble with math. I offered to tutor her, and then word spreads in my family, free tutoring is going on. And before I know it, there's a bunch of cousins, family, friends that I'm tutoring every day. I started writing software for them. A friend suggested that I make videos too. When I started making those videos, my cousins infamously told me they liked me better on YouTube than in person. So I just kept going there as well. I was getting letters from people all over the world saying how it was helping them, and sometimes in very significant ways. And so that's why I did set up as a nonprofit in 2008, Mission Free World Class Education for Anyone, Anywhere. And then 2009, yeah, I quit my day job thinking that, hey, the world could benefit from this. And I was really enjoying it. And maybe we could make it work.
So, when it came to educating your own children, you created a brick and mortar school, the Khan Lab School. Why?
Well, in 2011, some folks reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to write a book?" I was initially skeptical. I was like, "Why would I write a book? I can communicate on YouTube. It's an easy way to get stuff out there." But they said, "Well, no, books has a certain gravity to it, etc." I'm like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot," and I'm really glad I did because it does flesh out your thinking. The first third of the book was the One World Schoolhouse, and the first third of the book was about the history of education. I said, oh, well, what was happening here is we had mass public education came about 200-300 years ago. We had to make compromises. We couldn't give everyone a personalized education the way Alexander the Great had with Aristotle. So we batched students together, moved them together to set pace. And then the last third of the book, I allowed my imagination to go free a little bit, say, well, given what we know and the tools and the way the world is going, what should education look like? What would an ideal school look like? And it wasn't just about using technology. It was about students being able to teach each other. It's about mixed age classrooms. It's about mastery learning, which is just the idea that if you haven't learned something well yet, you should be able to keep working on it. It's silly to get a C in Algebra 1 and then somehow try to get an A in Algebra 2. Or it's even sillier if you got a C in Algebra 1 and then you get an A in Algebra 2, that C in Algebra 1 is still on your transcript. Clearly, if you got an A in Algebra 2, you know your Algebra 1 as well. So that should now be upgraded to an A. It was also based on the idea that if you could learn some of your core skills more efficiently, you could have more time and space for some of the higher order things, creating things, being entrepreneurial, going out into the world. And there was a few families, actually mainly at Khan Academy employees, who were like, hey, let's start a little, I don't know, pod school, homeschooling cooperative around these ideas. And then when the Khan Academy board caught wind, they're like, hey, it looks like you're actually trying to start the One World Schoolhouse. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. And some were skeptical that we should be starting a brick and mortar school. Some were like, no, this is exactly what the world needs to push the envelope even more. So we did set it up as a separate entity from Khan Academy. So it isn't the same organization. But that's when we started Khan Lab School. And yeah, now it's a pre-K through 12 school out here in Northern California. And it's I'm learning a ton. I've learned a ton, but for the most part, I've been pretty excited about what it's been able to do.
What has it taught you about the balance between individualized learning and batch instruction? Are there places where batch instruction is called for, as much as that can seem like sort of a mechanized version of learning? And what has it taught you about that balance between being in person in a brick and mortar place versus being able to get the instruction you need online? Have your views on that changed?
No, I think it's my views on that have only gotten stronger, but they haven't changed. When I started this, I said, well, look, I don't want my kids or anyone's kids to only be, no matter how well a tool like Khan Academy might be able to teach them. And obviously now it's in theory even better with things like AI. That's not what it's all about. Like, you don't want children who don't know how to interact, who deal with conflict, don't have support from other human beings, both their peers and faculty. And if you look at like the Common Core standards or any state standards, they don't explicitly call out things like this, like should be able to deal with conflict, should be able to be resilient, should be able to communicate their needs. And actually, you're able to do that more explicitly in an environment like this when you can offload some, not all, some of the core skills by leveraging technology. But even when we're leveraging technology, a lot of it is, okay, students are learning at their own time and pace, but now that you're in the room together, interact with each other, tutor each other, or do something a little bit deeper. So, I'm not batch implies that you're just moving everyone together at a set pace, regardless of whether it's good for them or not. So not a fan of batch processing for education, but I am a fan of being in a cohort. And sometimes it is good for it to be an age-based cohort. You are going through certain life stages for the most part at the same time, certain levels of maturity. And sometimes it's really great to have mixed age cohorts, which the traditional batch system usually misses, where I think a lot of, and we're seeing this at Khan Lab School, a lot of the bullying behavior, a lot of the, I would call it teenage angst behavior. The theory is that, look, they're proto-adults. They're capable of responsibility, but traditional schools don't give them a lot of responsibility. We still treat them like kids. But if you tell a 16-year-old, hey, you're going to go mentor that 13-year-old, it matures them, and they're less likely to use bad language. They're less likely to bully someone else, because they feel like they're a leader in the community, that people are going to be listening to the things that they're going to be saying. So yeah, overall, it's just only reinforced how important it is. And I'll say one other thing that, I didn't design it when we founded the school, but we're hearing loud and clear. Our kids we've had 5 graduating classes already, and they're doing excellent in all the traditional, their standardized test scores, where they're getting into college. I think the median student is getting into a college with like a 10% acceptance rate. So they're doing all of that stuff great. But if you typically saw a school that had if you saw our types of test scores and placement, and, a school where kids are typically taking calculus, say their freshman or sophomore years in high school, you say, oh, that's going to be a pressure cooker school. That's going to be a school where the kids are elbowing each other out and all. And if you visit our school, it's the exact opposite of that. You would not see a more collaborative group of kids, because they're not going against each other. In a mastery-based system, they're all working together so that they can all elevate and get to proficiency.
I might be biased because I'm Italian and I'm an alum of the Montessori school, but it sounds very much like the Khan Lab school is very similar to a Montessori school. But one of the criticisms that people raised to Maria Montessori was that at the end of the day, it was a school for the rich. And certainly, it seems to me that Cab Lab School is a school for the rich. In Mountain View, I don't want to know the tuition, but I don't think it's free as the rest of your program. What I find it fascinating is the free part of your education, because that changes really, in a way, the philosophy of the education. And I was perplexed by some of the stuff you wrote, because I don't know whether you're playing nice or you're really nice, or you're sort of trying to... When you are describing the history of education, it's clear that when mass education was introduced, to was not a free gift that the upper class were giving to the lower class, was a training a workforce to go to work in a factory. And all the discipline that is embedded in the traditional school is because you had to transform some anarchic farmers into disciplined factory workers. And so every mass education is, some sense, distorted by the desire of the people giving this education. And every for-profit school is distorted by the desire to capture profit. You have found a mechanism, at least so far, to provide education to the masses basically for free. And that enables you to have a completely different kind of education. And if I were you, I would push more this idea of how your philosophy of education is completely different than the rest, because it doesn't need to provide a very high return.
Yeah, well, but we do want to make it have so it has arguably a higher return. But you're absolutely right. Khan Lab School is not a free school. We have done it as a private school. We have another offering, Khan World School, which we've done with Arizona State, which is actually free to any student in Arizona. So anyone listening in Arizona should take a look at it. And we have had to charge outside of Arizona because we don't have a charter, but that's a whole other thing. But your point about Khan Academy, well, one, I will defend the public education system a little bit. The public education system is engineered or designed based on a factory model, because during the industrial age, that is how we learned to do things at reasonable quality at scale. I will say that it has done very positive things. Literacy rates have gone through the roof. The middle class has expanded dramatically. So there's a bunch of very, very good things that have happened. But to your point, we now have tools where we don't necessarily have to make that compromise, where mass education has to be one size fits all. And so our main theory of action is, yes, there could be Khan Lab schools and Khan World schools. And we're even exploring ways that people can independently work on Khan Academy and get credentials that can help them get into college or get a job. But we think the real movement is going to happen by us working with traditional schools, meeting them where they are, because that's where most students are, and helping those schools and those teachers personalize education that much more. And so that's where, most of the energy of Khan Academy, and you mentioned our marginal cost is close to free, but it does cost our budget's about $90 million a year, which we primarily fund through philanthropy. But most of that energy of that team, it's about 350 people now, is to build tools that we can go into schools and we can show those schools and train those schools. If you use it this way and it fits into your traditional curriculum, it'll improve outcomes. Now, I also do dream that one day we can revisit some of the things that we're forcing kids to learn, but I think it's important to meet the system where it is.
So most of your area of intervention has been K to 12. What about university in general? Do you see that your next future is to create a Khan University, or in addition to Khan Academy?
Simple answer is yes. When I talk about, there's a young girl, I just recently met her. She's at MIT, freshman at MIT, just finished her first year. It turns out she grew up in Kabul. Taliban takes over. Her family flees to Pakistan. She has zero education. Khan Academy was her education, both when she was in Kabul and she couldn't go to schools, and then when she was a refugee in Pakistan. She gets in her mind that she wants to go to MIT. She applies. MIT's super impressed by her, but they're like, we have no idea whether you're ready for MIT or not. And so we have a mechanism on schoolhouse.world where you can prove your knowledge by, it records your face, your screen while you take a Khan Academy assessment. You can validate your knowledge. And UChicago is part of this as well. And she did that and they admitted her. And I met her when she came out to California as part of the Sam Altman AI boot camp for like the top engineers in the country. She was out here in Silicon Valley, and my wife and I had dinner with her, and so that reinforces that we need to figure out ways of credentialing, high school credentialing, and then college credentialing. And yes, I do think that I hope in the next 5-10 years, us or other people or in partnership with other people can find ways. And I don't think it's going to be a replacement for a UChicago or a Harvard or a Stanford. I think those are always going to be luxury goods. But I hope we can create alternative pathways where they could be close to free, but provide just as strong of a signal that your material, you're just as qualified as someone from UChicago or Stanford or Harvard or wherever. So yes, that is something I hope to do before I retire.
Is there a key piece of insight that you got from having launched the Khan Lab School, from having this physical manifestation of your ideas that led you to do Khanmigo any differently than you might have done it otherwise?
Yeah, and you mentioned Khanmigo. Khanmigo is our name for the AI assistant, or the AI teaching assistant and tutor and other things, AI anything that we've implemented in Khan Academy. But yeah, there are some students, I would say maybe 5, maybe 10% of students who are self-motivated enough, and we can debate why they are self-motivated enough to engage in something like that. And yeah, we're in a renaissance for those students. Those students can just go to town and learn at their own pace. But most students need more support. They need accountability. They need human beings in their life and they need other things. Even those 5-10% also can benefit from human to human interaction, et cetera. And so that's where, I learned through Khan Lab School, and we're learning every day working with school districts around the world, that that role of that teacher is essential in this AI world. Khanmigo, a lot of people's like, oh, is this about replacing teachers? Like, no, and I think it would be impossible to. And I actually think as long as the teaching role evolves in the right way, I actually think it's only going to become more and more valuable. If you imagine teachers being people who only disseminate information, then there's other ways to disseminate information. And it's not just AI, it's videos. Even when the first textbooks came out 150 years ago, teachers were afraid that it was going to take away their jobs. But now teachers can't imagine teaching without a textbook. And so it's all about the job evolving. And I think many teachers, the best teachers today, recognize that their job is not to just be the source of information. Their job is to make a really engaging, interactive environment when they're in the classroom, to be able to personalize and differentiate as much as humanly possible, to be able to hold students accountable, to form human connections with them. And if we can create tools, Khan Academy, Khanmigo, that can offload some work for the teacher, even in their prep work, support students more real time, it should free up the teacher to do more of that human to human work.
I appreciate what you're saying, but there is a risk. Instance, one of the roles of teachers, especially in early years of education, is also to babysit the kids, and that's an important role. It's not the most highly qualified part of being a teacher. So the risk is that that role will remain, and the qualification will be taken by Khanmigo. And it's a bit like a Uberization of the teaching, where you reduce, with respect to a taxi, the old-fashioned taxi drivers knew where to pick up the clients, what was the best route, all characteristics that made him somewhat valuable. And today, the Uber driver is just a machine that pretty quickly will be replaced by sort of these self-driving machines. So, isn't that risk in the process?
There could be, but I don't think that that's how things are going to evolve. A lot of what we talk about is ideally you do have access to an amazing teacher and we can raise the ceiling there. But if you don't have access to a teacher or an amazing teacher, we can raise the floor. So on that latter case, in the extreme, yes, you can be in rural Alaska or a young girl in Afghanistan. You have no access to anything. Hopefully Khan Academy, Khanmigo, and we have another platform, schoolhouse.world, which is free tutoring and certification, that those can raise the floor for you. We also know, and we've experienced all of this, sometimes, and this is happening unfortunately more and more in a lot of our schools, is that you might have a substitute teacher for 2 or 3 months at a time, or you might have a teacher who's not expert in that field. Let's say, the school's trying to teach financial literacy. There's no financial literacy expert in the classroom. So they get the PE coach. The PE coach might be great. PE coach, no wrong, nothing wrong, but they're not an expert in financial literacy. And now all of a sudden they're teaching the financial literacy class. So we hope that in those situations, once again, we can raise the ceiling and raise the floor, where at least you have something to lean on, where the students can continue to move forward. But the ideal use case for the skilled teacher is always going to be that they can go that much further, especially if they're supported with good tools, to dive in, diagnose what's going on with their students, do in-person interventions. There are teachers who are already doing this, but it takes heroic amounts of effort to personalize in a class of 30. Any of us, if we had to do that even an hour a day, we'd get tired before we start. And there's teachers out there that are doing it for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And then they go home and they spend 20 hours grading papers and this and that. So I believe, as you automate driving a car, yes, you just gave the example that, already out in my town here in Mountain View, at any intersection right now, I see 5 Waymos. It's actually quite creepy. We're now used to it now. It's like these ghost taxis. But I don't think that that's going to be the case in education, because for my own children, or frankly anyone's children, I want my kids to have that caring adult go up to them and say, "Hey, Sal, that was really great. I saw what you did there." Or, "Hey, that wasn't so cool how you just talked to Mary. How do you think she would feel if she talked to you, or how would you feel if she talked to you that way?" These things are going to be irreplaceable. And that the teacher, and not just the teacher, I would say the teacher and the broader community that ideally kids are a part of.
So you have the best of intentions for Khanmigo, and probably the wherewithal from a personal standpoint to make it happen. Do you worry more broadly that the era of AI in education could release something far less pleasant, in the sense that in this day and age of budget cuts, too often instead of an AI and teaching assistants, it will be too often instead of a great teacher using AI, it will become a teaching assistant using AI, or just AI for our least privileged kids? And what responsibility do you feel to stop that? Can you have any responsibility to stop that beyond putting out the best product that you can?
Yeah, no, I definitely have fears of AI in education, but I don't have those fears as particular. Okay. I'll start with those fears. I haven't talked to one school district anywhere in the world, red state, blue state, anywhere, that even is hinting that they would even think about using AI to replace teachers or use it as a justification for less skilled teachers. And if I did see that, I would advocate very strongly against it. The places where AI is going to create a problem is cheating. And I write in my new book, Brave New Words, cheating isn't a new phenomenon. It's been there for a long time, but AI maybe has just made it a little bit more egalitarian. It's a lot easier to cheat, and it's a lot harder to detect now. We are working on solutions there where the AI is working with the teacher, providing more transparency to the teacher on the process, on how something gets constructed. So instead of the student doing the paper in a vacuum, they do it with the AI, where the AI acts as an ethical coach. And then the AI can communicate to the teacher, making it transparent what they worked on. And if the student goes to ChatGPT or gets their sister to write the paper, our AI will tell the teacher, I don't know where this paragraph came from. We didn't work on it, and it looks a little bit different than, Jimmy's other writing. There's used to be this whole class of stuff that we used to say, kids, go do that on your own, do it at home. They were already cheating, frankly. Chegg, the public company whose market cap went from like 2 billion to zero when ChatGPT came out. The reality is Chegg was a cheating platform where for $30 a month, kids could go put their homework up and people would tell them the answers. And now ChatGPT comes out and it's free to do the same thing, but it was already out there. And so I think it's actually good that AI is putting a spotlight so that educators aren't naive that kids weren't already doing this.
No, I agree 100% with that. This year, I decided that with my students, I actually encourage to use ChatGPT because I think in the real world, you're going to use it. So trying to prevent them from using seems like impossible. And so I said, you can use it. There's one condition that I'm going to call you in class. And if you don't know what you've written down there, you get 0 in class participation. And it seems to be working. So I think that I'm very sympathetic to that view. And I'm also sympathetic to another thing that you write that I thought was very interesting, which is the fact that we learn in different ways. And I learn it through my kids because, of course, I learn my way. But then I saw that my kids were learning a completely different way than I learn. And there's not one way to learn. And the great advantage, I think, of Khanmigo is that you can fine-tune that. But let me play the devil's advocate here. And my concern is now, who owns all the information? So you are building a phenomenal data set of how people learn, basically. And so you have individual characteristics, they have how they progress, how they don't, so that in the future, I can do a test and immediately be assigned to version A or version B or version C of Khan Academy. And now, what are the protection for this database? And this is one thing I have to ask because, as we know, OpenAI is transforming itself into a for-profit. And when there is a lot of value at stake, it's very difficult not to be tempted. So what prevents you from tomorrow becoming a for-profit that really exploit massively all the data you have accumulated?
Yeah, it's an important question. Yes, I think OpenAI has completed its transformation into a for-profit. When I started Khan Academy, and I didn't know that the generative AI revolution was going to come in 2025, but I did think about this notion of data and even like old school AI, having just people's data, how they're performing on different things. You could optimize, give them different treatments, et cetera, even back in 2008, 2009. And so I did think that data is going to be very important. And that is one of the many reasons why I set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit. Frankly, I didn't want people to question why we are doing this. Going to now, we still take that very seriously. And it's not just about, the fact that we're not for profit. We also are very clear with people that we will never commercialize the data. We will never sell it to anyone else. We don't, whenever we use outside LLMs, they are not allowed to use the data. And then there's another aspect of data that, I think there could be well-intentioned people who could say what I just said, but they haven't passed their SOC 2 audits and all of that, and some hacker comes in and takes the data. So that's where I think it is important for someone to have credible organizations that know how to protect the data as well, which I think we do quite well. So, that's where our DNA is. This is what we've been doing from day one. This is what we've promised the world. And I think, one of our advantages is in this world is in this AI world. And I tell this to the team every day, is that the trust people have in us. If you go back over the last 15, 16 years since Khan Academy became a real organization, there were a lot of people who showed up on, some of them have even told me they were inspired by Khan Academy. And they said, oh, we're going to democratize higher education, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they all had to kind of sell out one way or the other. And not that they're doing bad things, but they couldn't stay true to that mission or vision. But hopefully people see that this isn't just, we're not just some fly-by-night thing that's saying the right thing just to make people trust us inappropriately, that we've been living by what we've been saying for 15, 20 years.
So apart from the question about monetizing data, what about the question that data becomes a straitjacket for kids? You write about the potential for AI to be sort of a companion going through your life and to help evaluate you as you roll into college applications. But does that then limit the potential of human beings to transcend themselves, to make a leap from one state of being to another mental state of being? Because now there's this thing that has been with them all along that says, but that's what you were. And thus that's what you will be. And that it becomes a limitation for certain types of intellectual leaps or leaps in being.
Well, I actually think that was already happening well before Khan Academy and AI. That example where you get a D in Algebra 1 in ninth grade, and then you become a serious student and, get an A in Algebra 2 and pre-calculus and calculus. But you're still not going to be able to get into Stanford because you got a D on your transcript, even though you turned everything around. So your transcript was already that data that can judge you pretty harshly at a time. And later when you get your act together, the world's not willing to give you a second chance. And that even happens, you drop out of high school and then later in your 30s, you get serious, but now there's a stigma associated with, a GED or whatever else. I think the solution here is around this notion of, well, I would say mastery learning and lifelong learning. The mastery learning is this idea of if you haven't learned, if you're at a D level, you should always have the opportunity and the incentive to improve it. So for example, at our labs, so on Khan Academy, that's the way it works. If you keep getting something wrong, you can't do it, but then eventually you improve it, you can always improve what Khan Academy says. Whether you know it or not. Then you couple that with lifelong learning, because I think there's another dynamic where we only have a window to really prove who we are. And then the rest of our life, people judge us based on how we performed between the ages of roughly 14 and 22. But if we have lifelong learning where you could say, well, look, even at 30, I can master calculus as well as the best University of Chicago or MIT student. Well, then that should be all people know about you.
If there's one guardrail you could put around the introduction of AI in schools, one criteria you would put in place before a school could roll out AI throughout its K through 12 education, what would it be? One prerequisite, maybe would be a better word than a guardrail.
There's a bunch I could list about transparency and security and all of that, but I would say this is not a guardrail. It's just a guidance. It's just like, know why you're doing something. It shouldn't be about AI. It should be about like, what problem are you trying to solve? And if the problem you're trying to solve can be solved with pencil and paper, solve it with pencil and paper. But if it's AI, use AI, because people keep, not just at schools, but everywhere, keep falling into this trap. When the iPad came out, Los Angeles spent some ridiculous amount. I'm tempted to say it was something like $500 million on iPads. And then they just gathered dust because they didn't know what they were going to use them for. And then similarly, there's a million startups that are claiming AI, this, that. But why are you using it? What outcome? What efficacy do you hope to push to that? And then kick the tires. Make sure that it's real. Make sure it's not vaporware.
So in the book, you describe how you were approached by Sam Altman to give a positive image to OpenAI and ChatGPT. And certainly you're contributing tremendously because Khanmigo is a great idea. Are you an investor in OpenAI?
No. I wish I was, or I wish I bought some NVIDIA right when he called me, or right when I saw GPT-4 6 months before everyone else. But no, I have a shockingly conservative investment portfolio. No, I live a very, well, I would say upper middle class. We have 2 cars in the garage, and I live in Silicon Valley in a nice cul-de-sac. But no, but it's like a 2,500 square foot house. So no, I'm not rolling in it. But I'm very happy where I am. And even to give Sam and Greg Brockman credit, I don't think they were just looking for. I think actually most people in the field aren't just trying to, look good. I actually think they do want to believe that what they're doing can be good for humanity. And so I think they actually did call us because they thought we could do something that's truly good, not just something that looks good.
So yeah, I'm the economist here, so I have to play a certain role. And I want to ask you, you live in one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive area in the world, and you make a nice salary, but people that did what you did are in Silicon Valley, they're worth billions. And as we discussed before, I don't know your value, but you're not worth billions.
I'm
So,
not worth billions.
so how do you feel about your choice of starting a non-for-profit now? And what motivated you then? What motivates you now? And what are you telling to other people that have to make this decision today?
Yeah, I'm I'm always a glass half full person, and so my wife will tell you I'm good, maybe of always convincing, arguably deluding myself sometimes that the grass is always greener on my side, which I think is a great way to live. By the way, I advise that. But I know I don't question it for a second. Having Khan Academy as a not for profit, I have zero envy for any than anything other than what I have. I remember in the very early days of Khan Academy, Bill Gates, who has been a great supporter of ours, he once told it was actually I think he said it publicly in a newspaper article that I envy Sal. And when I first read that, this was early days of Khan Academy, I'm like, what? Bill Gates is envying me? Because I think you just imagine that, like, okay, if you go from having $10,000 to $100,000, it is 10 times better. Or if you go from $100,000 to even $1 million, it does probably, maybe it's 10 times better. Maybe it's, depending on but if you go from $1 million to $1 billion, it doesn't necessarily, there's diminishing returns in terms of your direct happiness. And I think what Bill was saying is that he really envied that I get to work on something all the time that is one, he likes to learn for learning's sake. I love to learn for learning's sake, and like really steep yourself in that, and to be able to communicate that, and feel like I get to be part of something that could hopefully empower hundreds of millions or billions of people. Yes, zero envy on my part. I almost feel like I'm showing off right now, so I'm gonna stop talking.